Good afternoon, dental internet world. My name is Dr. Vishal Sharma, and I'm once again here alongside my friend and colleague, Dr. Mike Parchewski. Mike, it's the first nice weekend that we've had in Calgary in some time. The sun is shining, the flowers are blooming, and the plants are starting to sprout, which is a perfect segue into our topic of conversation today, which is alternative digital implant planning workflows within the office. Good to see you, Mike.
Good to see you, bud. I'm surprised you didn't mention golfing in that.
Well, hopefully these implants lead to a much higher success rate than your short game right now. So
Nice. Good dig. Welcome, everybody. And today's our topic, again, we're talking about implants and guides and how we can implement these procedures in a digital workflow into our clinics. And today we're going to be touching on some different options that people have when they don't have the capacity to mill in office and they are sending out to labs or to outboard companies such as Simplant or Azento or CCAT. So we want to talk a little bit about that flow today, so that we've been getting a lot of questions about that. So we're going to touch on that.
Yeah, and so currently, Mike, why don't you walk us through what your non-Simplant Azento workflow entails?
So technically, if we're doing a single implant right now, our workflow is we'll take a Primescan on the patient. We'll then do a CBCT of the quadrant of the missing tooth. We'll merge that into CCAT implant software. You can also use Galaxis. From there, we treatment plan the implant, and in our protocols, we've talked about this on other podcasts, we use the digital implant case presentation, where we are walking through the planning of the implant with the patient live. Once we have the plan confirmed, patient's happy, we go ahead and mill the surgical guide on our milling chamber, which you could either use the Primemill, we have an MCXL. So we'll go ahead and mill a surgical guide for that implant. And, typically we're using the Astra system, so it's a CEREC Guide 3. Then we'll be able to go ahead and book that patient could be the next day. We can basically book it anytime. It takes about 45 minutes to make the guide. So the whole treatment planning process is about an hour. But that's sort of the workflow we do for singles and double implants. With the double implants, we'll be actually milling 2 guides for that. What's your current workflow?
Yeah, it's really similar to yours. Obviously, you've been into CEREC Guide 3, which has the built-in osteotomy burr stops or the keys built in right into the system, so you don't have to hold them externally. We're migrating to that system, as we were talking before we started recording. I've got my first central incisor with Astra this upcoming Wednesday, so I'm excited for that aspect. So everything is really similar, mostly CEREC Guide 2, gravitating towards the more streamlined approach of CEREC Guide 3. And then a topic of conversation that we're going to be discussing today is what if we can't fabricate those guides in-house? And in our practice, Mike, so we would send out something if we are working on multiple units, obviously a lot of different surgical guided sites in an arch. Of course, there is a complicating aspect to doing the guides in office. Your system is very, very streamlined, like an hour from start to finish, from consult to surgical guide, obviously is really impressive. And I think it's achievable for most people. But initially, if this is something you're getting into, ease of just sending and referring something out, obviously it's a great benefit. Having a second set of eyes or someone who has routinely gone through the treatment planning aspect of implants can be really effective as well. And, one of the other aspects, and this is more what you're into, not so much with the limited, more simplistic window of implants that we're placing, is if you're having to do some ridge recontouring or, bone removal, etc. So that's in our office, our workflow, and why we would send a guide out to a third party. You've done a lot of work with Simplant, and obviously it's a very good system and company. Can you talk about it?
Sure. First, I wanted to ask you a question. So do you 3D print your guides right now?
No, we're milling. Even though we have 3D printers, we're milling.
Yeah, we've done some of the 3D printing with it, and right now you can do the 3D printing of the CEREC Guide 2, and you can go into InLab and do 3D printing of your guides with multiple implants off of CEREC Guide 2. because we've been using primarily CEREC Guide 3, I think when the option becomes available to be able to 3D print a CEREC Guide 3, I think that would be, pretty cool process. When we were 3D printing for the CEREC Guide 2, a while, this goes back a year and a half when we were still doing a lot of the CEREC Guide 2 before the new software updates to allow the CEREC Guide 3. We did find that the milled guides just fit better on the teeth, and we tended to have to adjust the 3D printed ones a little bit.
Interesting.
But I do know that as the 3D printers have improved as well, with the new Formlabs, the new some of the new ones that are coming out, where the micron accuracy is higher, people are 3D printing more of them. And I do know, like for example, when we talked with Josh, the guides that they're producing for their in lab at their school, the training, have been amazingly accurate. But now we're dealing, that's a Stratasys 3D printer, which is
different price echelon,
which is a few $100,000. So I do think the ability to 3D print will continue to evolve. There are people doing it. I've done it. For me, I think if I didn't have the milling capacity, I'd probably 3D print more, just to keep it all in office. So that is out there.
Just one thing to add to that before you jump into my Simplant. Obviously the benefit of being able to 3D print, of course, is the complexity of the guides. And it should be noted that you have CEREC in lab, so you have the capacity to do that. For those people who wouldn't have that software, it's obviously a little more challenging. You can do it through Blue Sky Bio or some other third-party planning mechanisms. The other thing that you'll find once you get a Primemill is the milling is just much more streamlined than with the MCXL. The cleanup is a lot easier. It's much less challenging on the system. I know you have yours rigged to collect a lot of the plastic debris. So the Primemill is just a better system for milling for sure. But yeah, I'm excited to see what the new applications are with printing, and I'm sure there's probably a lot more coming out in the next 6 months to a year.
I think we're going to see some huge jumps with that. Now you'd asked me about the MySimplant. So I will mention that. So basically, what MySimplant is a software where you can outboard your product. So you go through the CEREC Connect, you send it to the MySimplant as a partner that your communication partner that you're sending to. And so you would send out into a file on your desktop from the CBCT, the file into the partner file export. You would then take that file and you bring it over to your CEREC on a USB. You export your STL from your Primescan of the missing tooth. Then you would also send out your CBCT uploading through your CEREC Connect. And the benefit of doing that is you're able to send, basically you can do that, you can still follow that same digital workflow. It's just that you're going to have somebody making the guide for you. And so basically it's nice way to integrate digital workflows into your clinic before you have, let's say, a milling chamber. So if you have just an digital acquisition, which could be iTero, Trios, and you have a CBCT, you'll be able to go through a portal through those systems as you can with the Primescan, and then be able to send the data to MySimplant. And then what MySimplant is basically they are working with you on planning your case. And so you'll have like you said, the second set of eyes, you'll have a technician helping where to place those implants, the alignment, the position. You'll get a rendering back that you can critique and you guys can modify, and that you can do with multiple implants. You can do that with single implants. You can do it with edentulous arches, the all-on X concept, which is being a little bit more prevalent, I think, these days than all-on 4. And you can also merge this into planning with Atlantis solutions as well.
Interesting. So, how often are you using it?
Like I said, any of our multi-implant cases, we've been doing that way. We have, we've also worked, we work with a close lab too. We work with Unis Lab in town as well with Zolt, who's a bit of a wizard. So, the goal really is to standardize the way you do full arch implants. And the goal of that is to consider, if you want to do full digital planning, you need to use Simplant, and you need to have a lab tech that's able to work with that. And so you'll need to give them the information about the dentures. You need to plan the bone reduction requirements. Yep. And so what you want to get back from that planning is a bone reduction guide. You want to get placement of your implants with the guide, and you want everything to be already planned as where it's going to end up, so that there's no guesswork, right? And that's the whole goal of it. Now, there's a lot of new things that have come out. And so you're quite familiar with the Azento product. And so let's go through, because Azento is also using Simplant technology, but in a different fashion. So can you run through what the Azento is all about?
So, Mike, the thing I really like about Azento is it's just much more simplistic. So what you're talking about when we're discussing complex implants, multiple sites, all on 4, all on X, where we're doing bone reduction guides, that sounds really complicated to me, and I'm happy that you're nearby and we can send that stuff to you. So for a lot of the other dentists who are confident with their surgical skills but don't want to get into really complex surgery, Azento is a great option for that. So we have a central incisor coming up this week. It's a failed endo referred from one of my associates. Endo was probably done 20, 30 years ago. So we've extracted the tooth. We decided not to do an immediate. We grafted it, and we're going to place an Astra implant. But if you're getting into central incisors and you want to simplify that aspect, Azento is a great option. You take a digital impression, you take a CBCT, and you send that off to Azento. You're going to get this great box, and in that box, I think you referred to it one time as, almost like a Christmas present. You have the implant, the surgical guide, and the osteotomy burrs that you're going to be using for that process. Also, along with that, you're going to get a temporary abutment or healing abutment, and you'll also get a temporary crown. So it's essentially just you're going through the surgical aspect, placing that. Everything else is done. There's no other lab work. There's no other prosthetic work that needs to be done. If that temporary fits really, really well, the contacts are good, it looks good, you also have a digital file that Azento has sent you that corresponds to that restoration. And so you can just plug that into your CEREC and mill a final restoration if that's your prerogative. And so it's just a really simplistic approach where you're minimizing all of your non-chair side time. Great for anteriors, and obviously works really well with Extra or other compatible products.
Yeah, I think it's a great product. For a lot of people, it's just a different mindset, where you're basically skipping the impressions. You're skipping all the parts in the middle because you'll have a custom healing abutment in place. And so you've already got tissue conditioning happening. You can have a temporary on. So you, at the placement procedure, everything's sort of, the majority of the work's done. And then through the process, you don't need the scan post now. You don't need all the rest of those. So people don't realize that the benefit of the Azento, while you have that cost of the lab part of it, when you price it out on buying all the impression copings and all the other parts, the healing abutment, all that, you're ending up with, it's ending up being less expensive because your time savings.
Totally.
Right? So it is so primarily we're same as you. We're doing it for anterior work. We're doing it on immediates because I don't know about you. I don't mind doing acrylic buildups to make tissue conditioning when I'm doing an immediate, but sure easier when it's just a custom made one that you put right in. And so I do really like the immediate protocol. Using it, and I've still had cases where we've done with Azento on immediate for a molar, for example, where we ended up burying the implant a little bit further such that the tining didn't line up, so the custom abutment was a little bit askewed. So we ended up modifying the custom abutment a little bit, and in that case I could have actually just gone back and done an acrylic one, but we were able to preserve the one that came. But so, understand that there's those little tweaks, but boy, it's when I'm not having to pound a bunch of acrylic around an anterior zone, it's super nice.
Yeah, so it simplifies the simplistic implants, anterior zones. It cuts out a lot of the extraneous work. Everything comes within the kit, enables us to more easily tissue condition or develop anterior aesthetics. So great for people with a decent background in surgical expertise who may not necessarily want to go through all of the other prosthetic challenges or steps to get that result. A bit different now with Simplant edentulous, and that's something you've been doing. Talk to us about that, Mike.
So if we're doing a full arch or full upper and lower arch case, our options here are to do this in a digital world. Is we can use the Simplant, we can use the CCAT as the outboard. Mm-hmm. We can use an outboard lab that we work with. It could be Orem, could be Unis. But all of these, if you work with the labs and the technicians, they all will work with you on that workflow so you can keep things digital. But what you have to communicate here is we're always, when we're doing single crowns, we're doing that crown down approach. We're knowing where that end point is going to be, where that crown is going to be. Well, you need to do the same thing with an edentulous arch. So what you have to do is create a set of dentures, inexpensive set of scan dentures, no metal in the dentures, and you basically do all the work in those dentures to get the bite, mm-hmm. the phonetics, the comfort, the aesthetics, all that ironed out before you even start. The days where we would just place implants and then work forward from there make your life actually more complicated.
Interesting.
So what you want to do is always have a set of dentures. So if you're just doing a lower denture and they have upper teeth or vice versa, or a full set, make the dentures first. Okay, and so it's a little bit extra cost up front, but make the dentures. And then what you do with the dentures is you add either like little scan balls, metal scan balls, or you can use the stickers.
So radiographic markers.
Yep. Yeah. So radiographic markers, so that will come through. And so what you have to do is you have to scan the dentures in your CBCT on their own, and then you have to scan the dentures in the patient's mouth. And when you scan the dentures in the patient's mouth, you have to have just a bite reg in there that separates them so that they're able to segment the dentures out in the software. Mm-hmm. So the teeth can't be overlapped in that scan. But basically what you've equated there is you've equated where the dentures are, what the dentures look like, where the teeth are in it. So you have a virtual model of the teeth. You have a virtual model of the bone, and you have a virtual model of the soft tissue. So in the Simplant software, they can play around with all of those layers. Mm-hmm. And what they then can discover is as they place the implants virtually, as they place the abutments virtually, they know how much and how little a bone reduction is required and where that is. Because the goal is always to have the bone as level as possible. Yeah. And you want always your prosthetic to be ovate. Okay. It has to be cleansable. Even if it's removable or fixed, you have to have that a little bit of the ovateness to it so that you don't just have a food collection site. And that's where bringing on like multi-unit abutments help, because multi-unit abutments take the connection point above the gums. So you got to bring things away from the gums so you don't have that bacteria infiltration, mm-hmm. Minimize peri-implantitis. And so it's following a protocol like that and working with a lab. But basically what you want to do is work with a team, work with a lab, develop your protocol, follow those kinds of principles. And that's how you can do complicated treatment in a team fashion and make it not so complicated, right? Because you have a plan.
I apologize about what I said about your short game earlier. If you can follow that level of detail, chipping and putting is going to be a walk in the park for you. So, it's really interesting, all of the stuff that you're doing from that perspective and the complexity with it. And I can see why the digital component is certainly helpful from that aspect. For those of us who are just placing more simplistic implants, you can see the comparison between Azento, which just simplifies everything, and then obviously Mike going into Simplant, which helps streamline a very complex workflow. How does it work with partially edentulous?
So very similar concept, except that you can do your scanning and planning within the CIRAC. You still need a bite index to move the teeth apart. And if it's going to be a partial or, that you're going to use as your tooth guide, or if you're able to plan the teeth just on your Primescan. So if you don't have a Primescan, you can use like a partial with markers. If you have the Primescan, you basically just plan the multiple missing teeth, and then you do the bite index again where the teeth are separated, and you send so you have your digital impression, you have your 3D scan, and you have a plan of the teeth, and you send that all off again. Same thing, you can send to your lab, you can send to Azento, you can send to CCAT, or you can send to my Simplant. I will add in right now that what Azento's doing right now, I don't know if I'm spilling the beans here, but Azento is coming out.
You are, by the way, you are spilling the beans.
Azento will be coming out with Azento Multi, which will be the ability in the Azento product line where you get that box of everything in there that will encompass multiple implants. So I've yet to see how that's going to relate to bone reduction guides and that, but I think it's going to end up replacing the concept of my Simplant. So you will have Azento and you'll have Azento Multi, which will be quite exciting in helping us with our workflows.
Yeah, it's certainly an interesting workflow, a lot of possibilities for those who are interested in getting into implants or placing them and just wanting to simplify the workflow or do a lot more within their office. These are some fantastic avenues to certainly do that. Just a quick summary with Azento, which is, the workflow that we've been discussing on my end. Primescan, just easy to get that digital impression. We take a CBCT, and there's a variety of really good ones, obviously, on the market. The Axio seems to be the gold standard right now. Upload all of that into the portal. And much like with any other support system, that within a couple days gets uploaded, sent back to you for approval. You can make some modifications to that. And then once you approve everything, you get that Christmas box sent whenever you need. So co-planning is really helpful for that, not only from the Azento platform, but also the Simplant platform. So Mike, I think that about covers it. You've got a tea time later today. You now have some very good motivation to avoid any 3-putts. What do we have upcoming for the next little while?
So our couple things I wanted to just add is that I think, with COVID and that we haven't been able to get, as many of these in-person courses. But just understand that I think what we should do is ramp up a YouTube video that shows these workflows. So I think we should put that together and announce when that on an upcoming podcast when we have that available, so people are able to go to the YouTube and visually see what we're talking about. So I think let's drive that forward so that we can where you guys can see the steps visually. Two, our next online is we're looking at we have a Dr. Neki Jamal coming to talk with us on the 25th. So in a couple weeks, and the goal of that podcast is to talk about surgery, socket preservation, different things that he's doing on teaching on wisdom teeth extraction. So we're gonna go surgical and how CBCTs can help us plan implant or tooth extractions. And how we can bridge that into PRP, PRF. So it's going to be an exciting one. I think it's going to be really topical and interesting for dentists. And I think that we want to get into some cosmetics coming up. And I think that's where we're driving forward. Follow up on some of the new updates I think will be in the works in the early summer. And I think that's our planning on moving forward.
Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast and visit our website, digitalworkflowdentist.com, for upcoming courses and events. And we'll see you next time.
Right on. Take care, everybody. And our Instagram at Digital Workflow Dentistry. All the links are in the bio. Everybody take care, and we are off to the golf course.
Thanks.